Welcome to the Sales Lead Dog Podcast, hosted by CRM technology and sales process expert Christopher Smith, talking with sales leaders that have separated themselves from the rest of the pack. Listen to find out how the best of the best achieve success with their team and CRM technology. And remember, unless you are the lead dog, the view never changes.
Welcome to Sales Lead Dog. Today, we have a special guest, Kristie Jones from Sales Acceleration Group. Kristie, welcome to Sales Lead Dog.
Christopher, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to have conversation today around all things good sales leaders should know.
There you go. I love it. And I'm excited to have you here. Kristie, tell me about Sales Acceleration Group.
Sure, Christopher. I started the company about 5 years ago. I have prior to that, about 15 years of SaaS sales leadership experience. And so I made a decision that I could help more than one company at a time. And so I branched out, and really my main swim lane, as I say, is mostly helping privately owned companies. A lot of my companies are VC-backed. A lot of them are in the software space, so a lot of tech startups. So I say I do zero and I do improvement. And so a lot of times when a company gets funding from maybe a VC or a PE or just bootstrapping and are ready to kind of formalize and build out the sales process, sales strategy, tools, and people, I come in to help do that. And then when things are maybe not going as well, I get that call to come. I call it look under the hood. And I look around at the people, process, and tools again to see what can be done. Most times I would say process is broken. So I never throw any people under the bus until I've seen the process. Normally we can fix a lot of the people problems if we fix the process. So right. I really enjoy, I say I'm a process strategist. Obviously I'm also a sales trainer by just organically needing to help people with the sales process and doing some improvement in sales soft skills training there as well. But I love the area that I'm in. I love helping privately owned companies take that $1 million idea and turn it into a 20 million or a $200 million idea, however far they can take it.
Yeah, no, I love that. And that's one of the reasons I was so excited to have you on the show, because I'm a huge process guy. It's all about process if you want to be successful. And so I want to go back and break those two segments down and dive a little bit deeper. So for those companies that come to you, that they're VC backed and they're just getting started, what are those problems or issues or goals that they have for you to really get them going? Could you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, there's really no formality, right? So again, all good VC-backed startups start with founder-led sales, as I call it. So, and that's always a little bit interesting because a lot of founders don't have a sales or marketing background, but they built the product, made the baby, and then went out into the world, and their passion really carried them through the sales process, right? Like they know everything about their own product because they built it. And the passion behind that, and the reason why, my favorite founder story is I was working for the man and I had a problem that I went out into the world to find a solution for, and there wasn't one. And I thought, if I have this problem, then everybody has this problem in my position. And so they got some money and they solved the problem, right? So we love that. But they're not sales or marketing leaders for the most part. So I mean, everything from mishiring, right? So I walk into a lot of companies. So one of the services that I offer is what I call hiring help. I'm not a recruiter. I don't source, but I project manage the hiring process because I say sales reps are professional interviewees. And so mistakes happen. Helping people guide through, hunters are hard to hire. They're slippery. And so you've got to make sure you find the right one. So everything from they don't necessarily have if they've tried to hire or replace themselves, if I say, sometimes they've made some mistakes around that. Chances are they don't have a formal prospecting process at all. Again, they've been, calling on the friends and family card, if you will, and the investors have helped out and throwing them some business, but they don't have a formal outbound prospecting strategy. They don't have a formal inbound strategy. And so really, I call it building top of the funnel. So I spend a ton of time helping them build the top of the funnel and then building out the stages of the sales cycle. I put checklists together, right? So every stage has a checklist. What are the things that need to be accomplished in order to move to the next stage? What's qualification for even getting in the pipeline? And then there's a nurture perspective. I call it NRNs, not right nows. The world is filled with not right nows. And that, in apathy is the number one reason why deals don't close, right?
Right.
And so those are filled with not right now. So do we have a not right now strategy? Most people call that a nurture strategy of some sort, but I don't mean just kicking it back to marketing. I mean, what is the sales rep going to do to ensure that that deal will close at some point? Because you've already put in on the hard work.
Yeah.
No reason to quit now.
Yeah. So, you talked about a lot there that I think applies to really just about any business, regardless of where you're at in your life cycle. You talked about a lot of issues that I guarantee you there's people listening and going, yeah, I've got those three problems.
Yeah.
What's the advice you have for, if I have one of those problems and I want to really begin addressing it, what advice do you have for those people to how to get started?
Yeah, I say process before people. So, bringing in people without a process is really setting them up to fail. And that's just frustrating for them and frustrating for you, right? And then, I get a call from founders all the time saying like, sales team's broken, like something's wrong. And I go, maybe. I don't come in just to do sales team evaluation. I said, I'm gonna have to look at the process too, and for most of the time, that's the reason, right? And so you have to have that formalized process. If you don't put top of the funnel in, then, most people, again, remember, like in my world, only, on a good day, 20% are closing, right? That means 80% are not closing. Yeah. That means we have to keep filling 80% at the top. That's hard. Outbound prospecting is hard. But without, and most of it's just consistency, right? What I find is, we have tools out there now, right? HubSpot's got sequences, SalesLoft, Outreach, Apollo, like you name it. We got prospecting automation tools, right? So there's no excuse anymore for not being consistent about that. But that really is the problem. So the founder will say, well, like, yeah, I made a bunch of calls last week, and I go, what have you done this week? Nothing, right? Or the sales rep, we had to stop doing that so we could do this. And so really helping them understand that like the only way to be successful building top of the funnel with an outbound prospecting strategy is consistency, because it's start and stop. Like I always say, if 4 days go by and the prospect doesn't hear from you, assume to start at 0 again.
Right. And one of the things you said there, you mentioned a bunch of tools like Apollo and SalesLoft and all that. One of the things I see is people will bring in technology thinking that's going to fix the problem.
Yeah.
What do you say about that?
Technology is just a tool to execute.
That's right.
The execution tool. That's not the tool, right? That's not the process. They don't create the process. They just help execute.
Yeah. I was listening to you, and there's a friend of mine who's an entrepreneur here in Denver that took his business from 3-4 million a range to 12 million. And as he was going through that, he was churning through salespeople, and he was constantly singing like, I can't find any good salespeople. It's a revolving door. And then it finally dawned on him, problem's not the salespeople, the problem's me. I have no process. I have no support. I'm thinking I'm hiring a rolodex to solve this problem for me, that they're going to come in and fix all my issues.
Yes.
That's not how it works. Do you see that a lot in your world?
I really don't anymore. I used to see the rolodex problem all the time. They're like, I have to hire someone in my industry. I have to hire someone in my industry. And I said, here's the deal. Most people in your industry sold them the product and they're under contract. So, I said, you need a good solution salesperson. And again, I'll be honest, I don't really hire people who've sold a product, but if you've sold any kind of service, I can make that work, right? As long as you weren't selling heavy equipment or, something like that, piping or some sort of a product. And so I said, we just need a good solution seller, right? Who understands the concept of process, who understands the importance of discovery, who understands that discovery is not an event. So a lot of people think discovery is just a call. That understands that discovery, is part of the process, and it's not an event. And so, I really don't, I'm just pretty firm up front with people about what they should be looking for and expecting. And there are times that people have brought in, I have a client in Kansas City that is in the automotive industry, and they built their first sales team with people from the automotive industry. Now nobody's from the automotive industry. So you've learned your lesson the hard way. And I just said, you need hunters, you need solution selling hunters, and we can teach them the industry, right? But I'm always shocked at the number of candidates that I interview and then end up hiring that have had 0 formal sales training at a prior job. Like really? 85%. Yeah. They've had industry training, they've had product training, they've been trained on the process, but they don't have basic sales skills training. They don't have soft skills training.
Right, right. So we've talked a lot about the VC world. Let's talk about the other component of your business, the non-VC customers. What are the problems they're dealing with, and solutions they're looking for when they engage with you?
Yeah, some of my clients I call like the 20-year startup, right? So they've been around, they've been plugging along. It's a lifestyle business,
Right.
but it got harder along the way, right? In a lot of those cases, sometimes the owner was playing sales leader, and everything seemed fine, but for some reason, like something changed, something got harder. The industry changed, the economic situation changed globally or something like that. And so a lot of times it's a lot of the same problems, actually. It's just there's not the pressure of the board, right? And the VC backed company. I mean, the thing that makes the startup so unique in the VC backed situation is you got to go before the board every month, right? And the pressure that the people have invested and want their money back is super high. In a privately owned company, and a lot of those, by the way, are family owned companies. Like I spend a lot of time in family owned companies, right? And so, the board happens at the kitchen table and it can happen on any given night of the week. Like there may not be some formality around that. But I had a family owned, privately owned company when I first started my business who reached out and kind of said, can we have lunch? And got to lunch and there was some him and hawed. And I said, what am I doing here? And he's like, we haven't been profitable for the last 3 years. And I was like, wow, okay. And we'd actually had a business relationship in a prior life where he was a partner of a channel partner of a company I'd worked at previously. And I was like, oh my gosh. And he said, can you take a look? And I said, sure. Well, his compensation plan was just crazy. Like he wasn't it was evergreen. And he had reps that had been there 16 years. So, you start to do the math on that. And I'm like, your payroll to revenue ratio is off the chart. Right. And then they don't know what they don't know. Right. And I think a lot of times in that situation, I get that type of call because I'm not in the circle, right? Like I'm not part of the golf foursome. I'm not having the cigar after work with bourbon. And they're like a lot of entrepreneurs, as spend time with other entrepreneurs. But that's an embarrassing conversation to bring up, right? Like everybody's sitting around looking successful and all of a sudden you haven't been making any money for 2 to 3 years. And so I get that call too, where kind of, from I'm a safe person to call, I'm not going to, I may run into you at the grocery store, but I'm not going to run into you on the 7th hole. And so, I get those calls too, where, hey, listen, I heard your name through somebody or, and things just haven't been going that well.
How do you engage with those customers? Is it different than the startups?
It is a little bit because it's a little, sometimes it's undoing things, right? Whereas at least I love the startup world because I get to come in there at almost zero, right? And so we're building it from zero, which means we can do it right the first time. In this case, I have to come in, at that point I say, I got to come in and do that evaluation, right? I got to know what we're dealing with. And then things like this, like I just described, pop up like, oh my gosh, you're paying them what? Like, no, that's not industry standard. Like, no wonder you're broke. And so really getting in there and seeing what, from a sales perspective, where are we at? You've had the same manager for 20 years, hypothetically, right? And so unless that person's going out and getting additional training. So a lot of times we're like, hey, techniques have changed. Technology is again, a lot of those companies are not up on a lot of the tech that we now have. New outbound prospecting, techniques. I call it the dreaded threaded, so remember when we all every email started with RE, and I still have people doing that. They're like, yep. And I'm like, oh yeah, people are onto that now. We can't do that anymore. Right. That only worked for the first 18 months. And then people were wise to that. But somebody read an article, right, a few years ago and threading is the way to do, thread these emails and they're still doing that. Right. So a lot of times it's coming in and saying, hey, listen, it's time to drink different Kool-Aid. And if they've had longtime employees, that's a little bit of a challenge, right? Because that's ingrained. It's not just a sales problem; it's a cultural issue.
Oh yeah, and those are often the hardest to solve. What advice do you have for a sales leader that is listening and saying, "Hey, that's me. That's my business.
Yep.
Living, that's us." What's your advice?
You know what? There are so many great resources out there that never existed. So there are fabulous books and fabulous authors out there. You know, because of the pandemic, I mean, there were never cheaper ways to get educated than there are right now. You know, you don't have to go get on a plane and go to a 2-day seminar anymore. You can take a 2-day seminar online for half the price. So I mean, there's so many. So I would say, like, I guess I get most frustrated with people who are not doing their own professional development or personal development. Like I'm on the lifelong learner, campaign.
Yep.
And so like, and I do like, it's my obligation to my clients, to read books, to stay on top of things, to attend webinars, to go to seminars, go to conferences so that I can bring that back. But I also expect you to do some of your own, education as well. And again, like we probably have more resources than we need right now, right? It's almost overwhelming. But I'm just surprised at people when I say like, well, what's the last leadership book you read? What's the last business book you read? And I'm an Audible junkie. So now I just say, what's the last business book you listened to? But I mean, like I'm always listening to something and, and again, like there are no new ideas. We're just recycling old and like customizing them or tailoring them to our situation.
Yep. Yep. So as part of our prep for the podcast, I always like to ask the guests, is there one topic you're really passionate about that you want to talk about today? And you brought up accountability, which I love. Talk to me about accountability as a sales leader.
Yeah, that's kind of the other challenge I walk into for sure, Christopher, is we may or may not even have a quota when I walk in the door, by the way. But in the event I have a quota or we're agreeing to put one in place, I said, no, we can do this, but what happens if they don't hit quota or they're off target? And they're like, well, what do you mean? I said, well, what are the consequences? Because it's only fair that the sales rep knows what the expectations are and what will happen if, right? And so that's where it's probably most tricky, as you pointed out, it's probably most tricky in the non-VC companies and the privately held, bootstrapped, family owned, right? Because the family word starts to creeps in a little bit on the VC side too. But, they're like, hey, like, well, we're not going to terminate anybody. And I said, well, okay. But I call this addition by subtraction. Right. And so, we have to if you're not going to hold people accountable and you're not going to put them on a performance improvement plan or have a verbal conversation or, send them out for training, like, what are we going to do? And so, but what I find is that people think expectation setting is micromanaging, which it's not. And then people think accountability is punishment, which it's not. So it really is how I frame it. And I really say to them, like, there's a reason why, majority of sales reps are not at 70% of quota. And I wonder how much of that is accountability. Now, is there a chance that the quota is inflated, particularly in a VC-backed company? Sure, there is. But everybody should be getting to 80%, right? And so do we, and having, like I say to people, I go, you have to have the upfront January expectation conversation. And again, just like discovery is a process, not an event, that's not an event either. We need to do that quarterly. I mean, the business environment last year, right? 2020, I mean, businesses were shifting on a 30-day mark, if not a 3-day mark. And so how on earth, and even last year I said to people, I go, have you sat down with every one of the sales reps and told them what your work from home expectation is? Like, they've got kids, right? They're doing homeschooling. So is it okay if they get on at 6 a.m. and take a break at 11 and don't come back on till 2, but work till 7? And do they know that that's okay or not okay? Right. And so it's everything. Like, I have communication expectations discussions. Like, when I was in the office, I told people, I'm like, hey, listen, like, you can totally just come and stand in my doorway. That's acceptable communication for me. Right. Whereas other managers would be like, don't hover. I don't like that. So I don't think leaders really necessarily understand all of the categories of expectations. It's not just say, hey, here's your $500,000 quota for 2021. Go get them, Tiger.
Yeah, I just had a conversation today with an owner of a company who we were talking about accountability from a CRM perspective, owning the data in CRM. It's an ongoing issue at his company. This is a new client of ours. And he said to me, I've had this discussion with my sales team so many times. Why are sales leaders having to repeat these discussions? What's missing?
I think upfront conversations and expectations. So, I mean, I just came into a client recently and it's a mess. Like, they've got Salesforce and it's just like, I mean, that's the 800-pound gorilla, and most people don't even need that, that kind of, expansive CRM system. but I mean, it's just a mess. And then I, start to interview people as I do. And the head of customer success says, yeah, nobody's filling out notes. I go, what? They're like, well, they're filling out the fields because we made it mandatory, but they're not actually writing anything in the, they're not completing a call note. And I'm like, huh? And so I'm like, why do you think that is? She goes, because nobody's made them. I was like, okay. And I'm really militant about it. I CRM hygiene, I have zero tolerance. And so I do think it's setting the expectation, but it's explaining the why. And I say to people, listen, we bought this as an employee benefit, like healthcare, like dental, like PTO. We gave you the most important tool that you're ever going to have. How on earth are you expected to remember a conversation you had 30 days ago if you do not complete your call notes in the CRM system? And how are you supposed to know how many calls you even need to make every day if we don't have the data to help you do your personal sales math? And so I say, it's not negotiable. And I say to them, listen, if you don't want to do sales hygiene, that's cool. I'm going to opt out of the base salary too, if that's okay.
Oh yeah, that is, I could not agree. People that are listening, if you watch this on YouTube, you see me go, raising my arms and go, yeah, because I could not agree more that's the part that's missing is the why. You have to explain why it's important. It's not enough to just say, do this.
Right.
You have to get people to buy in.
Yes.
And unless you live in
Yes.
somewhere where you have absolute control, which doesn't exist, you have to give them a why, a meaningful why, how it helps them, but it's also how it helps the rest of the organization.
That's right.
Management is making decisions based upon what's in CRM. Customer success is preparing for that handoff, when that deal is closed by the notes, the information that's in CRM. If it's not there, they can't do their job.
Yeah.
That relationship is not going to be managed appropriately. So
I'm with a CRM consultant now at one of those clients I mentioned, and he says, and I'm putting together, literally, I've done this week. This is where I spent a decent amount of time. I put a Salesforce expectations document together, CRM expectations document together. Right. And I said to him, and he's been the magic on the back end, and he's been, creating the reports and all of this and, doing all the integrations and those type of things. And I sent it to him, and I sent it to the customer success director, and I said, what's missing? I said, just at the basics, but we're going to roll this out to the team next week. And it's going to be, and again, it's fine. I have to come in and reset expectations or set expectations that were never there. And at the bottom, he put, if it's not in the CRM system, it never happened.
That's right.
I feel the exact same way, but he put it in this funky font and put it in blue, and it was hilarious. And I'm like, it's so true. But I said, you guys, this is not this is not punishment. And for every sales job, there is a percentage of administration that has to happen, right? Yep. This is just part of the job. But most people don't understand. I go into a lot of companies, Christopher, where they don't understand their what I call personal sales math, right? And they don't know what their close rate is, what their average sale is, what their sales cycle is. And so they just know that they've got the same $500,000 quota as the 3 people sitting around them. But they have no idea that they can get there that they're going to probably get there a different way than each of those 3 people, that everybody's going to get there a different way. Well, if I don't have that data in the CRM system, how on earth am I going to help you figure that out?
That's right. There's no way, if you get into trouble and you're you had a great first quarter, but your second quarter sucks, how can you figure out why? If you can't go back and look at CRM and say, hey, I see you doing this. Have you thought about trying this?
Yes.
You can't do it.
Yeah. And it's just, and I think they get, sales managers, we get worn down just like anybody. Right. So you get pushback on that. And I just have just been real, again, since, I go all the way back. My first CRM system, I'll date myself, was Goldmine, and going all the way back in the day. And, I knew, I'm a data chick, right? And so I knew that there was liquid gold in them there hills, no pun intended for Goldmine, but there was. And so I was like, guys, you help me help you help yourself, and then again, like you said, and then help the customer service team and help the customer success team, help us figure all this out, help marketing, all of that data is so important. And it's really I think when you approach it as a punishment, that's what it's going to feel like. Right. But if you approach it as, this is assume I'm giving this to you just as I gave you health insurance.
Oh, yeah.
It's that important, in my opinion.
Yeah. And it's I love what you said about this is not a punishment. This is, we're giving you another tool for success.
Mhm.
That's what this is all about. It's a tool to help us succeed, for everyone to achieve their goals, your personal goals, be it compensation or success, or, the feeling you get when you hit quota. But it's also for the whole organization. We're all working towards the same thing. We all have to be, pulling in the same direction.
That's right.
So if I've got that team, if you were in that room with a business owner I was today, what would you say to him?
Like, it really has to be a non-negotiable. I mean, it really does. And there are just some non-negotiables. And the reason why we can have them is because we are paying you a base salary. I'm like, if you're 100% commission rep, I got a little less leverage, right? But I'm paying you a base salary plus a variable compensation component for a nice, total package, including the benefits and all the other things and stock options in a lot of my cases, right?
Yep.
And so, like, I have a right to, tell people, I pay you a base salary so I can tell you what to do. And
Yep.
one of the things I need you to do is, again, it's consistently prospect. It's self-source your own deals if you're an account executive. It's Salesforce hygiene, CRM hygiene, like, it's all of those things. And so, you have to lay that out. And then, there's just, it really isn't, honestly, like, I would term somebody if it was a consistent problem over time, because it's just, it's not like, I believe in A player privilege, but this is not one of the areas I believe in A player privilege, right? A player privilege is you don't have to come to me for every little discount now and then. You've earned the right to know what the margin should look like and those type of things. But this system is not negotiable. And so, but really it's a bigger, like, going back to the accountability culture, that's a piece of it, right? Like, getting people to fill out the CRM is a lot harder when you don't have an accountability culture in general. And so, like,
Exactly. Now, I've had some sales leaders go so far as to say, hey, when it comes to data hygiene, we're looking at it all the time. If your data hygiene's not there, if it's not at the minimum threshold, which I like to say, set that really, really high, as close to 100% as you can. If your hygiene's not there, you're not getting your commission check until it is. Do you agree with that approach or disagree?
I do. I really do. Like, I just have no tolerance. I really don't. And there's just no reason for it. And really, like, these are the same people that are going to miss quota and wonder why. Right. And I was like, listen, like, let's take it, like, it's just, I have a college age son, and I say, like, half the battle in college is just getting out of bed. Right. Because if you can get out of bed, then you don't even have to shower anymore. Right. You just have to, like, just put on a clean shirt. You don't even have to have pants. And just get in front of the computer. Like, you just have to get to class, right? Like if you get to class, I guarantee you can at least get a C.
Oh yeah.
Right? Just like these are minimum requirements.
Yeah.
And I do, and I think that, and the flip side, by the way, talking about the client in Kansas City that I mentioned, like, that CRM system's too complicated, right? There are too many fields.
I see that all the time.
The UI looks scary. Like, it scared me. Like, I pulled it up for the first time and I'm like, where do we even start, guys?
Yeah.
Like, there are so many fields. You just scroll and scroll and scroll.
Oh yeah. That's insane. And that also directly impacts adoption and use and data hygiene.
That's right.
You're creating these barriers for your team.
That's right.
That shouldn't be there.
No. And I have a one-on-one with the founder every week. And so we had our one-on-one yesterday, and he said, what other, we talked about one particular issue I was having with the team. And I said, he goes, what other issues are you having? And I said, the CRM system. I said, the UI is like at a place I have never seen. Like, I'll be honest with you. I said, I've never, when I got in there, it's one of the questions I don't always ask, but for some reason, somebody had said something when I was doing my prospecting and my discovery call that got my attention. And I said, just out of curiosity, how many people have admin rights to the CRM? And they were like, everybody kind of looked at each other. I go, more than 10? They were like, I go, everybody? They're like, most people.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, you got to shut that down right now.
Yeah.
I go, you got to shut that down right now. And I said, if you've never worked with a CRM system, like, first off, most CRM systems out of the box have 85% of what you need, right? Yep. The amount of customization you need to do is not extensive. Like, you don't need a field for everything. There's always there's something already there, right? And so I just said, please shut that down as soon as humanly possible. And they even had a CRM consultant that was already under contract. And he was in the room. I looked at him and he was kind of like shook his head like, sorry, I tried already. But I mean, like every time somebody wanted a data point, they just added a field. And I was like, OMG. And so it's funny because he said, we're having problems with CRM compliance, right?
Yeah.
And he said, now I'm wondering if it's what you just said, like they look at it, this looks so scary that they don't want to do anything. Like it's just so overwhelming. And I said, yeah, the UI is frightening.
Yeah. You can't train people. We once had a client, I kid you not, they had over 300 custom fields on their sales opportunity.
Oh,
absolutely nuts. And when you looked at the utilization of those fields, it was a fraction of a percentage. So you're, I mean, to scroll around and you know, they're scrolling and trying to pick the fields. It was nuts. And you know what? No one was using it.
no.
And no, they're just like, I don't even know what these fields mean.
Right.
I don't know what I'm supposed to populate, what I don't need to populate.
Right.
They weren't training to that. There were just so many core issues that, you know, that we just like, oh my gosh, we're starting over. We're stripping all this crap out and we're starting over, and we're gonna, and then, you know, adoption goes up, you know, they're getting good data. They're able to make good decisions.
That's right.
It transforms everything.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, quantitative and qualitative, right? You have to have both. But if the quantitative just isn't there, or you can't trust it, right? I mean, you know, it's bad data in, bad data out.
What am I think? If I see golf handicap on CRM, I know like, oh my God, this is trouble.
Oh my gosh, have you seen that?
Oh yeah, that was one of the fields that they
Oh
had
my
was,
God.
I'm not kidding. Golf handicap. I'm like, are you kidding me? How is that helping your sales process, knowing golf handicap on the opportunity? What?
Oh my. Oh my.
I mean, it was just, I'm like,
that's a runaway train.
and that's
right
what you
there.
get when you have everyone going, hey, we need this field. I want this field.
That's right.
They make the request, they do it. And 2 weeks later, they forget why they even asked for it.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely happens.
Yeah, all the time, all the time. This has been great having you on and listening to you. I could go on for hours.
I know. Yeah, you and I could talk about this forever.
If people want to reach out and connect with you, they want to learn more about Sales Acceleration Group, what's the best way for that to happen?
Yeah, the quick and dirty is LinkedIn. So I'm on LinkedIn. I'm out of St. Louis, Missouri. So that's a quick and dirty way. My website is salesaccelerationgroup.com. And Christopher, as I mentioned to you, before we hit the record button, I'm going to put up a special page for your listeners. So salesaccelerationgroup.com/sales lead dog. And I'll have some resources up there about some of the things we talked about today. So I'll have some information about how to, like, behavioral-based interview questions to ask to ensure you're getting a hunter. I'll put up a sample checklist, you know, sales stages checklist, those type. I'll put up some resources that they can grab and that might be helpful to them. Because really, like, you know, like nobody, like the sales job is super hard. Sales leader's job is super hard. Like these are high pressure positions. And, you know, and I call it a tension filled sport. And so, like, you know, any kind of resources that I can provide, I'm happy to take. Again, I say I have 30 minutes for everybody. So if anybody's got a burning issue that they want some quick hit advice on, I've always got free advice.
Yeah, that's great. I do the same thing on the CRM side. So anyone who's listening, same thing, same offer applies. Everything she talked about, that URL, it'll all be in our show notes. So if you didn't happen to catch it, just go to the show notes. You'll get everything you need to connect with Kristie. Thank you so much for coming on. This has been great listening to you.
It was so much fun. Enjoy your weekend.
Likewise.
As we end this discussion on Sales Lead Dog, be sure to subscribe to catch all our episodes. On social media, follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. Watch the videos on YouTube, and you can also find our episodes on our website at impellercrm.com/Sales Lead Dog. Sales Lead Dog is supported by Impeller CRM, delivering objectively better CRM for business, guaranteed.